All right, welcome everybody to this January 18th, 2023 weekly webinar, Internet Troubleshooting with JMC. I'd like to introduce the team. My name is Jake Vanskoy. I'm a training specialist with JMC, and this is going to be a slightly different style webinar than you're probably used to. This isn't necessarily over a JMC process. This is over kind of a bigger picture item, and I will say I learned a lot about how the internet works in prepping for this webinar. I was a classroom teacher for 16 years in Eastern Iowa. Became an instructional coach, did that for about 6 or 7 years. There's overlapping time. Don't check the time frames on that. And now I've been a trainer with JMC for about 2 years now. So I am joined by Denise, or joined with Denise. Denise, you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
I sure do. I'm Denise Drew, and I just started with JMC in August. And prior to that, I worked in an office, a school office, for about 25 years. So I have more of an insight on the office side of things. So Jake and I are a good team together.
Denise is a wonderful support to training specialists. So a lot of times if you hop on intercom, you might chat with Denise, or if you send an email to the training team, you might end up chatting with Denise. So appreciate her expertise on this, and she'll be manning the questions. So we'll get right started. So Internet Connection Troubleshooting 101. We know that experiencing internet connectivity issues can be frustrating, especially when teachers are trying to take attendance or the lunch line is a mile long. So today, let's check out potential setbacks that you might experience and solutions that will help you diagnose and resolve issues that might be related to internet connectivity. So kind of the impetus of this weekly webinar, we have a lot of folks that reach out with issues that are perceived to be JMC issues. And when our tech support team dives into the heart of the issue, a lot of times what we find is there are some things that might be on the user end that could be causing some of these. So we'd just like to provide you with a little bit of insight into troubleshooting some of these potential setbacks and maybe identifying when or how they could be occurring. So we've got that wonderful Q&A feature built within Ring Central there. So if you ever have any questions during this process, you can go ahead and type your question in there. And once we get to a Q&A spot, we'll stop and answer all the questions that are directed at us. So jumping right in, JMC seems to be running slow today. What can I do? So you're experiencing a slow connection between your computer and JMC. Now there's a lot of things that could be causing this potentially, but let's start by looking at your actual connection to the internet. So are you hardwired to the internet, or are you using Wi-Fi? So the first thing that you would do is check your local internet connection. If you are hardwired to the internet, your connection will typically be better than if you're using Wi-Fi. If you're using Wi-Fi, check your proximity to an access point. So moving closer to that access point may improve your internet connection. So a lot of times what we find, especially in the lunch line, we do recommend folks using hardwired connections running through the lunch line. That's going to speed that process up just a little bit. And if those folks are using Wi-Fi, a lot of times in the lunchroom, you might be kind of a little ways away from an access point. So working with your tech director to find out where those access points are and how you can better improve your connection, your computer's connection to the internet might be part of that issue. The second piece deals with latency and bandwidth. And this is where I did a lot of my learning about how the internet works. So you might need to contact your internet service provider to see if latency or bandwidth are an issue. So the way that I understand it, latency is the amount of time it takes for an individual request to travel across the internet, across space, and then successfully return to your computer. So each request travels its own unique path across the internet, bouncing off of servers potentially going through space. And that may impact why you have a slow response time. So you can ask your internet provider if they can reroute your requests from JMC to speed up traffic. So the other aspect to this is bandwidth. So if you think of bandwidth as the total capacity available, I think how Bill described this to me, and I'm going to butcher this analogy. If you ring a doorbell, the doorbell represents, and the sound of the doorbell represents the bandwidth. So you press that doorbell button, everybody in the house can hear it. As long as the doorbell is loud enough for every spot in the house to hear it, somebody, as long as there's somebody home, is going to answer the door, right? Well, the bandwidth is like how loud that doorbell sound would be, and the latency would be the amount of time it takes somebody to hear it and respond by opening the door. So the total capacity, so the bandwidth is what you would pay for. That's your access to the internet. You would go to your internet service provider and you would say, hey, I'd like to purchase some internet from you. And they would say, well, how much internet would you like? JMC recommends that your local internet speed for each building be at least 5 megabytes download and 5 megabytes upload. 10 is even better for JMC. Specific for JMC, that's over and above your normal day-to-day school internet usage. And you can work with your internet service provider to increase your bandwidth as necessary. So a lot of times what I would hear is, well, I don't think bandwidth is the issue because we stream Netflix and we stream YouTube and, we're doing all of these things. And I run my internet speed test and it says I have all of this internet speed. Well, that's measuring bandwidth. So that's where I would tend to think latency would be that issue. So you're sending your request, it's bouncing off of servers, and then it's trying to return back. And that's, so there's actually two parts of that equation that might be slowing your access to the data. So number 3, what you can do is run a trace route. And this is something that you might involve your tech professional in, is have your tech professional run a trace route when the site is slow, when JMC is slow, to share with your internet service provider so they can better understand why your pages are loading slowly. So a trace route, we've got, depending on what kind of machine you're running, if you're running a Mac, Windows, Linux, whatever your system, whatever your operating system runs, there are different methods for running a trace route. And you could just Google search how to run a trace route on a Mac. And it's a pretty simple command, but what it will provide then is a report of the servers that are being touched or being bounced to when you're sending your information from JMC. You could take that report and give it to your internet service provider. They can help you diagnose, well, why is my latency so bad with JMC? Oh, well, it has me routed to a server in, this part of the world, whereas it'd be much quicker if we went to this part of the world. So they can actually dictate where JMC bounces to get its information and help speed up that latency that you might be experiencing. So any questions on any of that? And, I hope I didn't butcher that explanation too bad. I'm not a all-knowing internet guy. I'm learning a lot about this as I go, but speaking with our developers, Bill McElmurray, Matt Berlin, this is kind of how they explained it to me. So any questions, Denise?
There's no questions out there at this time, and I think you did a great job of explaining that, Jake, because I understood it, and that means a lot.
So that made sense to you. At least I made sense to you, Denise. So hopefully that carried through with everybody. So, all right, the other aspect, so that's if you're experiencing slow loading times and slow pages within JMC. The other piece might be receiving errors on certain pages in JMC. And there are a number of different types of errors that you could be receiving. So we'll just kind of give you the broad strokes of the potential errors that you could be receiving and how you could resolve these. So first and foremost, stay up to date. Update your internet browser to the most current version to avoid connectivity issues caused by running out-of-date applications. I would say from a support end, I see this more frequently than anything because nobody likes to update their internet, their browser. So, you know, if you're like me, you've got 4 billion tabs open on Chrome right now. And the last thing that you want to see is one of those little icons that says, hey, it's time to update Chrome. Because usually what that involves is shutting your Chrome down completely and restarting your browser. And then you have to, you know, reopen all those tabs and all that sort of stuff that you have going on, and it's time wasted out of your day. So we tend to put that off and put that off and put that off, and eventually it becomes a problem. So the first thing that I would say, if you're experiencing some errors within JMC, if these are not errors within the program, these are browser errors, start by updating your browser. JMC recommends Google Chrome or Firefox to maximize your experience. I know some folks might use Internet Explorer. Some folks might use Safari. We tended to have the best luck with Google Chrome and Firefox because they are the browsers that support JMC the best. They seem to have the most up-to-date equipment that go into their software. So speaking of your internet browser, maintaining your internet browser could also improve JMC, could help you relieve some of those errors. So you might need to clear your internet browser's cache and cookies to remove old data that might be causing loading or formatting issues. One of the common errors that I see sometimes when I'm working with JMC would be what they call it, an ASPX error. I think it comes up and it just, there's an error on the page, JMC goes away and it says, you know, unable to load, ASPX error or something like that. Timeout, connection timeout error is something else that happens frequently. A lot of times what's happening in the background is your browser is accessing old data that that is no longer good. So if you're trying to access the page and it's required a password, let's just say, if your browser is storing that old data somewhere within it, it can cause those errors. So if you clear your browser's history and you clear that cache of information, that would remove that old data that would help you then navigate. And a lot of times what I'll do, that stuff tends to go away with a little bit of time. So if I'm in a hurry, I might just open a different browser. So if I'm working in Chrome, I might jump to Firefox if I get an error. And usually those timeout errors will resolve themselves over, you know, the course of an hour or so. So any questions on errors? Now, there's a whole other set of error reports I'm sure that you're used to working with, especially doing state reporting. So those types of errors would be a different story. You know, those errors deal with the data that you put into JMC. So if you're experiencing those types of errors and you have questions on those types of errors, those are the things that you can reach out to tech support with, and we can help you diagnose why you're receiving those errors within state reporting. So how's that, Denise? Any questions on any of that? Is anybody chiming through?
No one has any questions at this time yet.
Awesome. Moving right along. Help, I cannot connect to my JMC site. It's a very broad statement. I can't connect to JMC. You know, I start with the user error, the simple things. The issues such as maybe the URL isn't typed in correctly, or the usernames or the passwords are not being typed in correctly. If you're using a link, like an external link on your school's website, is that link broken? Is that link out of date? So some of those could contribute to this, but on a much larger level, especially if you're just starting with JMC, have your tech professional whitelist your JMC's URL on the content filter to prevent JMC from being blocked by your school. So if your school uses a content filter, most schools use a content filter of some sort to keep kids from visiting sites that they shouldn't be visiting. If you're starting with a new content filter by chance, or if you're just starting with JMC and your current content filter does not recognize JMC, you would want to whitelist the JMC websites to prevent them from blocking. And what whitelisting is it's just the process of defining the JMC site as being a trustworthy site to prevent those content filters from blocking your access to JMC. Just like within your browser, within your internet browser, your computer has an operating system that must stay current. So every so often, your operating system has an update. It's a system update. And that could also contribute to JMC not being able to load. So update your computer's operating system to the most current version to include security or driver updates that might be preventing JMC from running smoothly. Most of the time we see it's some sort of a security feature that's added to an operating system that would prevent sites that share data from being accessed. So make sure you stay current and check your hardware. So review settings on your school's servers. And a lot of times school servers have built-in firewalls and content filters right in them. Review those settings to make sure that those firewalls and content filters are not blocking access to JMC. So any questions on content filters or anything of that nature?
Everyone must have this down. They must be tech savvy. No questions.
Well, you know, a lot of this is trial and error. And as we progress into the digital age, I'm sure everybody has experienced several of these things. And I know, you know, the tendency is we reach out to JMC. Oh, JMC is not working. We reach out to JMC. And, you know, our tech support, our support to training specialists, we go through and help you diagnose the problem. It becomes a lot more difficult to diagnose those problems when they don't exist within JMC, when they're on just the local, when the problems that are actually preventing you from accessing JMC are local. You know, I'm looking at your data. I'm sitting in my office looking at your data, and it's loading for me just fine, but it's not loading for you. We don't think you're crazy. It's important to note that when we get these issues, where it's not like, well, I don't think they're experiencing these errors. I'm able to do this on my end, so everything is fine. Not the case, and we know that that's not the case. But a lot of times, it's something that might be internet related on your end that might be difficult to diagnose. So that's really we just wanted to kind of put this out as a nice general resource for our folks that might be experiencing local internet issues, some things that they can help try. And obviously we would always work with folks, our tech support would always work with folks in helping diagnose any of these issues, whether they're JMC related or if they're on your end. It just might take us a little bit more time to get to the issue if it's on your end. That might be one of those things that we have you call Joe, and Joe can remote in on your computer so you can actually check out your local environment. So with that, I'd like to point you to some JMC news and upcoming events. The weekly webinar schedule is out for January and February. We've got rallying your entire school community on and off the field. It's a sales webinar. If you know of anybody that'd be interested in JMC, have them check that out on the 20th. Getting ready for 23-24. It's almost move up season. Check out that webinar on the 25th. We've got the MCCC reporting for our Minnesota folks on the 26th. In the fourth week of January, we've got our popular features and master schedule building stage 1 and 2 webinars on the docket. Moving into February, we've got a standard-based grading options refresher that I'm excited about. connecting admins to their entire school community with the Admin Connect app. It's another sales webinar to help your administrators get logged onto that Admin Connect app. And then Advanced JMC Teacher Series, continuation, giving paraprofessionals JMC teacher access. So that's something that you'd be interested in. I invite you to check those out. You can head to the in-app help widget, search for weekly webinars, and that might point you in the direction of some of those so you can get signed up just like you signed up for this one. Interested in hosting a regional workshop? Please reach out to training@jmcinc.com if your school is interested in hosting a regional workshop. One of our client services specialists will come out. We'll run a training for you free of charge. We'd ask that you'd invite other JMC schools that are nearby, and we're trying to round up as many folks as we can. I'll just throw a plug in there for Jake and Paul's Excellent Adventure. Paul and myself will be touring Iowa and Nebraska and Minnesota and Wisconsin coming up. Actually, I think Sherry Phillips is joining for the Wisconsin tour. So we'll be visiting several schools all across those states and saying hey to folks and providing some training and doing some fun things along the way. So we have the Refer a Friend, Reward Your School. Now through March 2023, we're offering schools a discount to refer their friends. For every school you refer to JMC that signs up for our software, we'll give you each a $750 scholarship for your district. If you have any questions, email sales@jmcinc.com. Looking for a part-time gig? We are looking for client services specialists in Nebraska, Minnesota, especially in southern Iowa and Wisconsin. So as a client services specialist, you'll be developing meaningful relationships with our users through communication, training, and support. And in return, we offer a competitive salary and the opportunity to work remotely. Please apply. Email your resume, letter of introduction to hr@jmcinc.com with I want to be a CSS in the subject line. As always, we invite you to be social with us. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn @OnlineJMC, or check out our blog at jmcinc.com/news. For Denise Drew, I'm Jake, thanking you for joining us today in today's weekly webinar, understanding all about how the internet works. So until next time, thank you for using JMC.